You're so stupid!
Hello, and welcome to Government is Fucking Stupid. And today I would like to start off by saying that the United States attacking the small island nation of Cuba is or was stupid. And I say is or was because as of today, which is Monday the 10th, the United States hasn't attacked the nation of Cuba, but by the time I'm done uploading this video to YouTube, who the fuck knows what this stupid government's liable to do? I mean, I sure don't. Pete won't add me to the signals chat, so I got no clue. Now, why would the USA attacking Cuba be fucking stupid, you might ask? Well, I think the better question is, why the fuck would attacking Cuba not be just ridiculously fucking stupid? And I think to answer that question, we should start with a quote by the oft-cited Prussian military guy. And as he says, no one starts a war, or rather, no one in his senses ought to do so, without first being clear in his mind what he intends to achieve by that war and how he intends to conduct it. Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, I just can't even hear that quote without hearing it in Sean Bean's voice, because I've spent so many hours of my life playing Civilization 6, but that's besides the point. But let's start with the first part, okay? So what does the United States hope to accomplish by invading Cuba? I mean, usually it's only after a country has been discovered to have some sort of valuable resources that that the USA decides that they need, to be made a democracy. And Cuba doesn't have any oil. In fact, they need to import oil just to keep the lights on, and the United States has been so busy blockading their ports that they're out of oil. The lights are on. There's been rolling blackouts throughout the country for weeks, if not months, at this point. So that's out. There's nothing there in terms of resources that the United States needs. Geostrategic location is another thing that can make a country a good candidate for being democratized by the United States. I mean, so much so that the USA will even threaten to do it to an already democratic country that's nominally allied to the United States. I mean, just ask Greenland. But, of course, Greenland is on the rim of the Arctic Ocean, which is increasingly navigable, and that itself offers access to previously unreachable resources and is a shortcut to Northern Europe and Asia. So Greenland is kind of important, and it's also fucking huge. A little itty-bitty Cuba just kind of sits there off the coast of Florida, just kind of hanging out in the Caribbean among a bunch of other islands and territories that are already at least somewhat friendly to the United States or even controlled by them outright. So sure, its location would make a pretty handy place for the United States to have a military base. Oh wait, no, the United States already literally operates a military base on Cuba. It's called Guantanamo Bay. Now, back during the Cold War, the Soviets did famously try to stage some medium-range nuclear-capable missiles on Cuba that would have put pretty much the entire mainland United States within reach of a Soviet first nuclear strike. And so this led to the famous Cuban Missile Crisis. Today, the Soviets are just no more, and their heirs are kind of busy getting their asses kicked in Ukraine, where they're flinging their nuclear-capable missile stockpile at Ukrainian civilians because Russia is a terrorist state. But the point being, they're probably not about to try to stage those kind of missiles in Cuba to threaten the United States with at this point, because again, they're busy shooting them at Ukrainian civilians. So Cuba does not offer the United States anything the USA doesn't already have in a geostrategic sense. We already have a base there. And then Cuba doesn't have any resources that the United States would be interested in. I mean, I guess there's the cigars, but I think they're a bit overrated, honestly. I think the big deal about them in the United States was just that they were unobtainium throughout, for so long because of the embargo. But Canada never recognized the embargo, so you could just go there and get them. And customs agents can't recognize a Cuban cigar from a Dominican one once you take the label off. So. But anyway, having had both, I'm perfectly happy with the Dominican ones anyway. So again, there's really nothing in Cuba I need, and I don't see there being much there that the United States needs. So going back to the first part of Clausewitz's formula, as far as what makes this a quote-unquote sensible war, there's simply nothing there. The United States can gain nothing from attacking Cuba because there's no resources for the United States to conquer, and there's no threat for the United States to quell. So they just lose. It's going to be not even a zero sum, but a negative sum prospect, simply just wasting resources attacking a country that doesn't really need attacked in any way. I mean, the closest thing to a rationalization we can get out of the increasingly addled mind of Donald Trump is this some nonsensical reference to the Monroe Doctrine. And indeed, now the idea of the USA wanting to keep old world European powers have those powers keep their noses out of the goings on of the Western Hemisphere did make its own sort of geopolitical sense when the Monroe Doctrine was written, but that was 200 fucking years ago. So it doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't really apply these days. Okay, because today Great Britain, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, they really don't have too much going on in terms of colonies in the Western Hemisphere anymore. I mean, okay, Britain has the Falklands there way down south off the coast of Argentina, but that right now today is more of a problem for Downing Street than it is for Washington. So again, there's just nothing there. And the fact that the Falklands are already a British colony and the U.S. doesn't really need to worry about that anyway, works out well because the other half of the Monroe Doctrine is the USA pledging not to meddle in the colonial existing colonies of those old world European powers, which again aren't really bothering us and isn't what Trump's talking about anyway. One country the Monroe Doctrine doesn't mention at all is China, which is one of the two countries that Trump is really most interested in chasing away from having business dealings in Central and South America. Oh, and the Monroe Doctrine doesn't mention business dealings or trade or commerce in any way anyway. So the other country that Trump is interested in keeping away from meddling in the Western Hemisphere is Russia. And the Monroe Doctrine does mention Russia, it does, but it mentions the version of Russia like 2 iterations back. The czarist one before the commie one that collapsed. The one that Putin's trying to put together in the current iteration, which is pretty much just as much trash as the commie one was. But anyway, and again, Russia isn't trying to colonize any Western Hemisphere nation. So again, Trump's attempt to invoke the Monroe Doctrine here is just one of his typically savage abuses of logic. So there's no valid geostrategic or otherwise logical reason for the USA to invade Cuba, destabilize it, impose a new regime, or otherwise just meddle around there. So there's no way to answer the first part of Clausewitz's quote. Not that this would stop Trump from going ahead, but there's just simply no way to come up with a good answer as to what the United States expects to gain from going to war with Cuba. Now, as for the second half, how to prosecute said war, well, I guess that's the easy part. Well, I mean, it's easy on paper anyway. Iran was supposed to be easy. Russia didn't think they would still be failing to achieve the objectives of their 3-day special military operation in Ukraine 4 years later plus, with parts of Moscow and St. Petersburg occasionally catching fire and exploding. But on paper, anyway, Cuba should be a pushover militarily. They just don't have much in the way of a military. Most of their equipment's old Soviet stuff that they haven't been able to service or upkeep or train on in any efficient way for decades. So their army isn't much of a threat to the United States from an operational standpoint anyway. Now, one problem the USA will run into in Cuba that is similar to what they've run into in Iran is that the laws of physics are well understood by the Cuban people just like they are the Iranian folks. So knowing that the USA loves to just bomb the hell out of countries from the air and hit them with missiles so they don't have to risk boots on the ground, Iran buried a bunch of their important shit way, way underground, and Cuba has done the same thing since the Cold War. They've got not ancient, but Cold War era installations way underground, way out of range of even American bunker busting bombs. So the USA will run into the same problem if they try to do this entirely from the air, and that is they'll blow up everything on the surface of the island. That won't take long. But they'll run out of important things that actually prevent whatever Cuban military response they're able to mount from going forward. And It might not even be able to totally decapitate the regime if the regime has time to get deep enough underground before the bombs start falling. Um, Another similar hassle that the USA will run into, as it did in Iran, is the problem of drones. Cuba has an unknown number of drones similar to that of the Iranian Shahed, which the Russians have been copying for years, so the technology is out there in that circle of those countries. But instead of being able to fling these drones at the oil infrastructure of countries in the region that are, allied to the United States, Cuba will be able to fling these drones directly into the continental United States itself, because it's, only 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and the range of some of these Shaheds is enough, some modifications of them, is great enough to reach Washington, D.C. or even New York City from launch sites in Cuba. So clearly then the entire southeastern United States would be within the range of these missiles, which is kind of and drones specifically, and that's kind of a bad news situation for the United States, because that's also the same area where a lot of our refineries live, especially the refineries that have been tooled to handle that sulfurous black snot that Venezuela calls crude oil. So, and those refineries have only just recently ramping up production and making making money for the United States to tax. Recently, now that Viceroy Rubio has been steering that Venezuelan crude to U.S. refineries. So if those get hit by these, which would be an easy reach, and they're big, large, stationary targets with a lot of things that are flammable, as the Ukrainians well know about refineries. So these would be easy things for Cuba to hit. And if they did so, you might see Moscow-style black rain falling in Corpus Christi, and I think that's probably going to get America's attention pretty quick, I would think. So to recap, there is no resource-based reason for the United States to invade Cuba. There is no geostrategic reason for the United States to invade Cuba. The United States already operates a military base on Cuba. Invoking the Monroe Doctrine is a stretch even for Trump and his aversion to reality and telling the truth. And sure, the USA can reach Cuba with a bunch of weapons that it still has piles of. We won't need to dip into our stash of Tomahawks and other long-range missiles, because Cuba's not far away. But we are short on the kind of interceptor missiles that would be nice to have if we were expecting to knock down any sort of response that we should expect from Cuba, whether or not the regime wants to believe they have any capacity to do so. Because again, how many times has the United States completely destroyed the Iranian military only for the Iranian military to just shut the Strait of Hormuz? So again, I think doing the same thing with Cuba, going in all expecting it to be a pushover and there not being any consequences, is probably a bad plan. But then again, this is the Trump regime, and well, it's a government, and as we know, governments are fucking stupid. And should Cuba start attacking the aforementioned oil refineries that are within easy range of any kind of Shahed drone, and should those attacks succeed, the damage to that critical American infrastructure is definitely going to be felt by an American public that is already paying too much at the pump due to Trump's lost war in Iran. So. And I've seen how fun it looks to, have to wait in line for hours to buy gas and then fist fight a drunken orc at the pump just to buy it. But I'm a little old for that shit. I think I'm going to pass. So in the end, there just is no upside to the United States attacking Cuba, and a pile of inevitable downsides. So as such, the very notion of the United States taking any sort of military action against Cuba can only be described as really, obviously, inarguably, inexcusably, and unforgivably fucking stupid. So I'll be low-key just astonished if the United States hasn't already attacked Cuba by the time this video is done uploading to YouTube. Anyway, thank you for sticking it out this long, and please like, subscribe, and share this video, and I will see you on the next one, and in the meantime, please don't be stupid.